Hello everyone, TRGG here and welcome back to the channel. In this video I'm talking about how and why the new expansion, Battle for Azeroth, feels rushed out and underwhelming. Probably because the development team ran into some unforeseen problems, or maybe they simply took too much on their plate and ran out of time. Besides all of the little bugs that most of us already pointed out during alpha and beta testing, there are other major problems as to why BFA feels like a rushed out expansion that just had to hit the shelves no matter the cost. But before we get into the video, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more WoW content. Alrighty, first a disclaimer, this is not me going on a rant about how bad the new expansion currently is. It's more the other way around. I'm pointing out certain problems and possible solutions. At the end of the day, all I want is for BFA to become a great expansion. I'd rather play an unfinished product with some flaws left and right than having to go through Antorus for another couple of months. But to make the expansion better, they have to change a few things. Let's start with the island expeditions. Yes, to no surprise, the island expeditions gave me the feeling like they were far from what most of us expected it to be. I hope some of you still remember on how the game developers were bragging about this new feature and how this new AI was going to make your life a living hell while you and your teammates were trying to gather Azeroth on the island, and that the AI would scale up in difficulty with Mythic being the hardest one. To be fair, the only interesting island expeditions are the PvP ones, and that's only because you're playing against other players and not against Blizzard's boring AI. Frankly, I'm quite sure that if the island expeditions didn't have that weekly cap, that the vast majority of players wouldn't even bother doing them. I have a lot of friends and guildies that agree with me and who only really do them because Blizzard kind of compels them into doing these island expeditions. I think that adding more rewards or bigger rewards is already a foot in the right direction. Next up are the Warfronts. During the time I was beta testing BFA, I honestly thought that the Warfronts were going to be scrapped. They feel like a PvE version of Azeroth, and the weird thing is that on live we just get kind of dropped into these Warfronts without any backstory or reason as to why we're battling over Hillsbrad foothills. I feel a great disconnect on the reason as to why I'm in this battle, and even if I decided to literally do nothing at all during the entire scenario, we the Horde would still win the Warfront. Yes, I know Blizzard did say that Warfronts will switch over from Horde to Alliance, and that the actual winner is already predetermined. But in general, I just feel really disconnected with the Warfronts, and I'm not even addressing the bug that happened when we finally collected enough resources for our war effort. For the people over at EU, this happened last Sunday, and I can remember that me and my friends were super excited for that 370 plus item level piece of gear that we could get upon completing the Warfront. But of course the instance group system got overloaded, which resulted in people getting paused during their queue, and even people not being able to queue at all. Of course, after a few hours the problem was resolved and we could finally queue. I find it weird that Blizzard didn't expect that every single WoW player was going to be online on a Sunday afternoon trying to get that sweet 370 piece of loot. Another weird thing is that unlike the Alliance, we didn't get access to the second world boss upon completing the Warfront, which is pretty strange as we the Horde win the Battle of Hillsbrad, but we don't get access to the second world boss. In a nutshell, Warfronts are pretty broken. I find it hard to understand as to why Blizzard implemented them in the way that they did. Getting 340 loot that can Warforge or Tinyforge for every time that you complete a Warfront, which you can and will win no matter what you do, is in my eyes a bit of an overkill. Diversifying the way in how we can get loot in the game is fine, but you can literally AFK through all of your Warfronts and be 340 plus equipped without even having done a single mythic dungeon or raid, which in my opinion makes zero sense. Next we had the amazing Mythic Plus cash bug for the people over at North America, where people who had completed Mythic Plus the week before BFA went live could go and loot their weekly chest and get items up to 400 item levels. Yes, again, this issue was resolved really fast and people were stripped down from their rewards, but this was again another issue and mistake that even a small indie company wouldn't have made. Yes, I had to make this meme at least once in this video. Next is the Azeroth gear and the awesome design traits. No, don't worry, I'm not going to talk about this subject for too long as most of you guys already know my opinion about it, but I do think that everyone can agree that there are far too many traits. Some traits are way too strong, like for example Thunderous Blast. Some classes have best-in-slot spec-specific Azeroth traits that are way more interesting than, let's say, Thunderous Blast, while for other classes their spec-specific traits are all the way at the bottom and are never going to be taken. Currently, Blizzard is also going back and forward between nerfing and buffing traits, which results in people holding on to any piece of Azeroth gear that they get because it might become better in the future. Which then again results in those awkward personal loot should I trade it or not situations. I overall get the feeling that the concept of the Azeroth gear is great, but the traits themselves have missed their mark, and that Blizzard really has to take some sort of action in the future. Remember that in other expansions we could look forward to our tier sets for when the second raid releases, but now it's just more Azeroth gear. My solution to this problem would be to already start with cutting back on the number of traits. Currently there are over 40 different traits, which is in my opinion way too much. I have no idea why they made so much traits in the first place, as I can remember that one of the reasons why tier sets were being removed in the game was for class balancing. Well, let me tell you, I think that designing so many traits and broken trinkets are far more responsible for bad class balancing than tier sets will ever be. The best solution would be to limit the amount of Azeroth traits and add another class-specific ring to the Azeroth gear. Which brings me to class design and class balancing. In my opinion, besides the classes that did get reworked, all of the other classes feel like a stripped down Legion version. I can remember being in the middle of beta testing and that all of a sudden Blizzard started reworking classes that were obviously not working. Like for example the Fury Warrior, it really looked like Blizzard realized that the Azeroth gear and traits were pretty lackluster and that they were running out of time, which resulted in them beginning to make class changes very late into the beta, which has never happened before. After those last minute changes, Ian communicated through a live Q&A that they were for the most part done with the class design and changes, and that other classes would have to wait until patch 8.1. It's strange to tell people that play a certain class like, hey, we know that for example Shadow Priest isn't working like it should, but we'll try to fix it in patch 8.1. If I could get $1 for every time I saw a Shadow Priest since Mythic Pluses and Raids were released, then I would have $2 in total. Releasing an expansion with unfinished classes again makes it feel like a rushed out expansion. Last but not least is the state of class balancing. Currently in the game there is such a massive difference between certain classes. It's pretty insane. Blizzard had to nerf certain spec-specific Azeroth traits literally into the ground, and they even tried to buff underperforming classes by quite a margin. These class balancing issues have already been pointed out during beta testing. However, during the live version of the game, you now have massive gaps between certain classes. Some people are even re-rolling because they feel like their character is more of a burden than an actual asset during Mythic Pluses and Raids. There have been fine-tuning patches, but honestly, in my opinion, a 5% damage increase for bottom specs isn't going to mean all that much in Raids. My top damage meter in Raids looks like this and has the following colors: yellow, purple, brown, and green. I guess you guys can figure out which classes those colors represent. Let's do a roundup on the reasons as to why I personally think that BFA feels underwhelming, rushed out, and why I get the feeling that I'm still playing the beta version of the game instead of the live version. And they're in no particular order. The Island Expeditions completely missed their mark. The PvP version is okay, but in my eyes most people are just doing the Island Expeditions because they feel like they have to in order to get their weekly cap. Next up are the Warfronts. I feel like we as players just got dumped into these Warfronts. There was no backstory nor the reason why we're assaulting Hillsbrad. For the most part, things were very unclear. On top of that, the queue system was bugged, probably because too many people tried to queue for Warfronts at the same time. Who would have thought that everybody was going to be queuing for Warfronts on a Sunday afternoon? Next on the list, we had the weekly cache bug, where people were already looting up to 400 item level gear pieces from their weekly chest, a mistake that was quickly reversed but still happened nonetheless. Moving on to my favorite topic, the Azeroth gear neck, and most importantly the Azeroth traits. There are simply too many traits. Some class specific traits are best in slot, while for other classes their spec specific traits are all the way at the bottom. People's bags, including mine, are already filled with Azeroth gear because traits are getting nerfed and buffed all the time. They have so much potential, but also missed their mark. And last but not least, class design and class balancing. Besides the few reworked classes, all the other ones feel like a stripped down Legion version. The class balancing is again a complete joke. Some classes are miles ahead of others. But hey, not everything in BFA can be a success, but I do think that war mode is pretty good, as long as world quests keep being interesting, which isn't all that long anymore because most people are now getting exalted with their factions. But wait, take a look at your Bastion slot trinket list. They come from completing world quests. Smart move, Blizzard. The new PvP talents are also quite good, and of course all of the old features like mythic pluses and the new raids are also pretty good. It's just sad that besides war mode, none of the other new features are actually any good and have been major flops. We're basically doing the same thing as we did in Legion, which is fine for me. I love mythic pluses and raids, and that's why I play World of Warcraft. But maybe for other people, they need something else. In general, I do feel like the expansion has been rushed out and maybe the development team took too much on their plate, but at the end of the day, I'd rather play an unfinished product with some flaws left and right than having to go through Entorus for another couple of months. Blizzard have one chance to try and fix their mistakes, and that's in patch 8.1. So I do hope that they will make some sort of announcement where they're like, hey, I know we made some mistakes, but we're actually going to try and fix everything in patch 8.1. Yes, I know I'm still optimistic for Battle for Azeroth, and I hope you guys think the same way. Patch 8.1 is Blizzard's last chance to learn from their mistakes, because if they don't, then a lot of people will be done with Battle for Azeroth very soon. And that is again all for this one, ladies and gentlemen. Please let me know in the comment section down below what your thoughts are on this subject. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and of course don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more WoW content. For the people that are already subscribed, hit the bell icon next to the subscriber button and join the notification squad. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.